10 shots. That's all it took to shatter reputations, expose betrayal, and bring a billionaire war profiteer to his knees inside the most exclusive shooting club in New York City. The echoes of gunfire still hung heavy in the air as stunned elites stared in silence, unable to comprehend how an exhausted nurse in faded scrubs had just dismantled an empire with nothing but skill and unwavering resolve. The final target lay obliterated in the distance, a silent testament to the reckoning that had just begun. I lowered my weapon slowly, knowing the world would never look at me the same way again. The relentless rhythm of New York City pulsed outside as I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Vanguard Range Club. Inside, the world transformed into one of polished mahogany gleaming brass fixtures and soft, expensive lighting. I barely belonged. My worn nursing scrubs and scuffed sneakers marked me as an outsider amid the tailored suits and designer shoes. The air smelled faintly of gun oil and aged leather. I wasn't here for appearances. 12 straight hours in the trauma bay at St. Vincent Medical Center had left me drained both body and soul. The final loss of a young gunshot victim weighed heavily on my shoulders. I wasn't nervous as I signed in. I had handled weapons deadlier than anything on these pristine ranges. Exhaustion had simply dulled my edges. My name on the membership ledger, Elena Ramirez, was a quiet reminder of a past I thought I had buried. I walked the long corridor toward Lane 12, my steps soft against the pristine hardwood. Crystal chandeliers glinted above illuminating portraits of past tycoons and politicians who had once stood where I now stood. The Vanguard Range Club was a private kingdom for New York's elite. I was a trespasser. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the VIP section through a pane of spotless glass. A group of sharply dressed men and one woman lounged in leather chairs, sipping aged whiskey and laughing over something unseen. The prototype weapons spread across the table caught my attention immediately. My stomach tightened. At the center of the group stood Victor Langston, the tall, broad-shouldered CEO of Langston Tactical Solutions. I had recognized him from defense industry headlines and congressional hearings. His commanding presence radiated wealth power and something colder arrogance. As I unpacked the simple rental Glock from the counter at my lane, a fragment of conversation drifted toward me. Numbers, figures, a weapons deal so large it made my pulse race. I kept my focus. 12 hours in an ER had taught me how to keep my face still, even when my heart pounded. I quietly prepared to listen, observe, and wait. The weight of the Glock felt strangely familiar in my hands as I loaded the magazine with steady, deliberate movements. I adjusted my stance poorly, placed my feet too close together, and tightened my grip far beyond what was necessary. Every motion was intentional. I had not forgotten how to fire a weapon. I wanted them to believe I had. From the corner of my vision, I sensed their attention shifting toward me. The smug chuckles and soft murmurs drifting from the VIP lounge confirmed it. I let the first shot fly wildly off target, deliberately yanking the trigger at the wrong moment. The laughter grew louder. I fired again, this time missing the paper silhouette entirely. The condescension thickened like fog. I allowed my shoulders to slump forward, let my hands tremble just enough to complete the illusion of incompetence. The mocking grew crueler, emboldened by their belief that I was just another outsider fumbling where I didn't belong. I could almost feel their disdain as a living thing pressing down around me. I knew what they saw, an exhausted nurse who had stumbled into their world by mistake. What they didn't see was the trap already closing around them. The next shot clipped the edge of the target, barely a hit, but technically a success. The laughter softened hesitation creeping into their tones. I made a small adjustment to my stance, aligning my feet, relaxing my grip. The transformation had begun. With each subsequent shot, my body remembered what it had been trained to do. Years of discipline, of late nights on desolate ranges and impossible distances returned as muscle memory. My breathing slowed. The distractions faded. Shot after shot punched clean through the paper center mass. By the fifth round, the smug amusement had evaporated into stunned silence. Their voices dropped to uneasy whispers. I could feel their collective realization taking shape. The unremarkable woman they had ridiculed was no ordinary civilian. The final round landed dead center, splitting the previous hole. I lowered the weapon, slowly exhaling, as I let my shoulders square fully for the first time. The pretense of nervous awkwardness fell away like a discarded mask. I turned my attention toward the glass partition, aware that eyes which had once dismissed me now struggled to reconcile what they had just witnessed. The game had shifted. I had revealed just enough to make them uneasy, yet still hungry to underestimate me once more. The stillness in the air held for a beat too long, like the pause before a storm. I watched as Victor Langston's sharp jaw tightened ever so slightly, the first visible crack in his perfectly polished facade. Pride had a way of baiting men like him into dangerous territory. I knew he would not back down. I calmly unloaded the magazine, inspected it, and reloaded with precise, fluid movements that betrayed none of the uncertainty I had previously feigned. I stepped back into position, my voice steady as I offered a new wager that would push him further into his own trap. The target setup shifted. 10 small steel discs were quickly installed on motorized tracks at the far end of the range, weaving back and forth unpredictably. My breathing slowed as I waited for the signal. The first disc shot out, streaking left to right. The crack of my shot echoed. The disc exploded into shards. A second target emerged, then a third. Each shattered in quick, relentless rhythm under my aim. No hesitation, no error. The VIP section stood frozen, stunned into speechless awe. Isabel Chen had quietly stepped away from her companions, her sharp eyes studying me, not with dismissal but with calculation and recognition. As the final target burst apart, I lowered the weapon and allowed myself a controlled breath. I turned toward the group. I felt their unease shift into fear. The timid nurse they had mocked had transformed into something they couldn't comprehend. I stepped forward into the tense silence, fully aware of the power I now held in the room. The persona I had worn like armor for years fell away. I revealed what they had never expected. I was Elena Ramirez the Phantom. Their reckoning had just begun. The tension inside the range snapped taut like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Victor Langston's polished composure crumbled as realization dawned. His eyes narrowed with disbelief, then flickered with anger as he attempted to piece together what had just happened. I stood motionless, the weapon now resting safely on the counter, my stance firm and deliberate. Colonel Marcus Hayes stepped forward from the shadows at the rear of the VIP area. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with the unmistakable posture of a soldier, he had watched the entire spectacle unfold. His silent nod toward me spoke volumes only those who had served could understand. His presence confirmed my identity in a way no words ever could. The conversation that followed between Victor and Colonel Hayes played out like a slow, inevitable unraveling. I remained calm as the accusations were laid bare. Langston's company had supplied secure communications devices to special operations units overseas, devices that had failed catastrophically, exposing teams and resulting in deaths, including my brother, whose memory burned at the center of my resolve. Isabel Chen, previously silent, finally stepped forward. There was a sharpness to her expression now, a decision made. Her eyes met mine briefly before she turned her focus to Victor, quietly offering access to company records and internal documentation to the authorities. The room froze as federal agents previously unnoticed revealed themselves and approached. As the weight of impending arrest settled on Langston, the fight drained visibly from his frame. Defiance shifted to resignation. I stood back and watched without satisfaction. Justice wasn't clean. It wasn't perfect. But it had finally arrived. Langston would answer for the lives lost under his greed and betrayal. The reckoning I had pursued for so long had at last been set in motion. The corridors of the Vanguard Range Club fell eerily quiet as agents led Victor Langston away in handcuffs. His entourage, once loud and boastful, stood pale and hollow-eyed, stunned by the swift collapse of their powerful world. I remained still, watching as the man responsible for so much loss disappeared through the heavy glass doors. The weight of vengeance should have felt lighter, but it didn't. My brother was still gone, and nothing could change that. I had only ensured that no one else would suffer the same betrayal. Colonel Hayes gave me a quiet nod before turning to oversee the evidence collection. Isabel Chen lingered briefly, offering a subtle gesture of thanks before stepping into the hands of waiting agents to cooperate fully. 6 months later, under a bright Manhattan sky, I stood outside St. Vincent Medical Center, the city alive with motion around me. The trial had ended. Langston convicted. Isabel's testimony and records had shattered the last of his defense. I had accepted a role with the FBI as a consultant, balancing those duties with my work as a trauma nurse. Somewhere between the two worlds, I had finally found purpose. I no longer needed to hide behind the ghost.